All right, so we're going to come back to this, which says the team company engages in a robust organizational socialization program. The team's program would most likely apply to employees who get promoted and those who are part of a succession plan, identified as high potential employees, changing career paths, working in line units. And so let's see what the answer for this one is. So the key word in this question is where it says organizational socialization program. So you have to know what that means to be able to get the right answer for this question. And as you can see on the right, the answer is C, changing career paths. But organizational socialization, I want you to think of it as onboarding. And this is part of the assimilation process of when an employee is coming into an organization. Now, there are three phases. One, anticipatory socialization. And right off the bat, you can see anticipatory means you're anticipating. You have not begun to experience what is going on yet. You're still in anticipation. So that's the way to get this first part understood. Newcomers, they form expectations of the organization, what it would be like to become a member of that organization. They're not yet a member, but maybe they've applied, they've gone through interviews, and they're already forming like, oh, this is what I expect, this is what I expect it to look like. And then you have organizational encounter. This is where the member actually enters and becomes acquainted with the new organization. And it occurs when the newcomer confronts the reality of his or her organizational role. Now, metamorphosis, just like it depicts, is a psychological adjustment that occurs when uncertainty has been managed and an individual's priorities move from being preoccupied with that transition into the organization, but now they're focused on maintaining their roles. So they've been able to adjust and uncertainty has been managed, and now they are focused on maintaining their roles. So back to the question, it says, they have a robust organizational socialization program, and the program would most likely apply to employees who get promoted and those who are changing career paths. So you can see how those who are promoted will need to have some kind of socialization about the new position, and also those who are changing career paths would also need to have some kind of socialization about the new career path that they are moving into. Let's take a look at another question, and it says, an organization will improve its ability to focus on critical business results by A, outsourcing non-core functions, B, improving the organization's employer value proposition, C, implementing a flat structure, D, focus strategic implementation on staff functions. All right, so this question, what would you say the key word is? It says this organization wants to improve its ability to focus on critical business results. So A says one way it can do this is to outsource non-core functions. And that's correct, because if it wants to focus on its critical business results, then it can outsource and give another organization the non-core functions to handle. That way it can focus on its core business results or its core business functions. So it then goes ahead to say in the explanation on the right, an organization will increase its ability to focus on critical business outcomes by outsourcing non-core functions. A line function is one that directly advances an organization in its core work. So this would include production and sales, and sometimes also marketing. Notice that production, sales, that advances the organization directly in its core work. Now, staff function, they support the line functions. So it supports the organizations with specialized advisory and support functions. For example, what we do, human resources, accounting and finance, public relations, legal department, those are generally considered to be staff functions. It's good to know what that means as well, in case you see a question that has to do with line and staff function.